So, curious about swashbucklers, or maybe you want to build a swashbuckler and you don't quite know where to start. I gotcha. Don't worry. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher aka Thraben, you here for another Pathfinder Second Edition video, and welcome to Optimizing Swashbucklers. Before we get going here, I want to say that this is a video that was made entirely because of a donation from one of my regular patrons. So thank you very much to Anubis for inspiring me to do, quite frankly, a lot of research on the Swashbuckler, which ended up being really fun. I had a lot of experience with the pre-remaster Swashbuckler, but not the post-remaster Swashbuckler. And while I used to think this class was pretty bad, after doing a really deep dive into it and doing a little bit of playtesting, I'm actually pretty impressed. This is part of a serious push to grow this YouTube channel, to monetize this YouTube channel, and make it so that this channel is kind of, financially speaking, worth my time to keep putting a lot of effort into. So if you enjoy what I am doing, I am currently making a push. Every Friday in April, May, and June, I'm going to be pushing out a video, and if the channel grows well and starts making some money, well, maybe I'll keep doing that. We're going to reevaluate at the end of June. If you want to support me, like, comment, maybe do a YouTube membership or something like that, every little bit helps. If you have a video idea you want to fund, feel free to reach out. These are some easy ways to find me. I'm not hard to find. As far as today's video goes, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the Swashbuckler class fantasy, because I so frequently hear, yeah, it's rogue, but bad, and I want to dispel that. And then we're going to talk about selecting your style and some of the things that might make each style pop off a bit. We're going to talk about initiative specifically with Swashbucklers, since they have some strange feats that interact with it. We're then going to talk about some of the best Swashbuckler feats, talk about turn cycles and spending and not spending panache, and then end the video with some optimization tips. As far as the class fantasy goes, the Swashbuckler is a speedy, single skill specialist. More on this in a second, but your Swashbuckler style is going to make you particularly good at one skill, because you are going to get this bonus called Stylish Combatant, that is going to give you a +1 circumstance bonus to skill checks with the Bravado trait, which are going to be the things that go and give you panache. In addition to that, you're speedy, because this Stylish Combatant feature also gives you a +5 foot status bonus to your speed, and that's something that's going to scale up more later. And I really want to focus on the fact that the Swashbuckler gets exceptionally good at one specific skill. Normal classes get better at skills by taking skill feats and skill trainings that buff up what those skills are capable of doing. But Swashbucklers have a ton of class feats that further buff skills, sometimes even completely changing what those skills are capable of doing. When a lot of people first read Swashbuckler, I think they are going to think that this class is a big damage class, because the class offers these really strong finishers that can do a lot of persistent damage. A lot of precision damage. And that precision damage is pretty chunky. Your bravado actions that lead to you getting panache are going to mean that you are a lot of times going to be a really interactive combatant. This is not the stride, strike, strike class. This is the I'm going to do one or more skill actions per turn class. And so you are maybe not the consistent damage dealer that some other classes, like say a fighter or a barbarian, might be. Your finishers are instead offering you really good burst damage, but it is perhaps something that you should not count on happening every single turn. More on that later in this video. Your finishers are really good burst damage, offering 2d6 precision damage at level 1. Like Chef's Kiss, that's a lot. You are going to require panache, which you are going to get by doing an action with the bravado trait. And your panache may or may not last for a long time. Sometimes the things you do will result in you having panache until the end of your turn. Sometimes you just gain persistent panache. One of the big downside of the finishers, though, is once you use a finisher, you can't use actions that have the attack trait for the rest of your turn. So you can't go finisher and, I'll just take a mapped strike. You've got to find something else to do with the rest of your turn. And part of this is what's making this Swashbuckler less consistent at dealing a lot of damage than other martial classes. Don't worry, the Swashbuckler has a lot of other things going for it. And I think a lot of people, when they look at Swashbucklers and Rogues, they kind of think they're the same thing, but the Rogue is better. Rogue is an excellent Pathfinder 2E class. It has a lot going for it. And a lot of the things that the Swashbuckler does are similar to what the Rogue does. Your panache and your finishers are sort of like off guard that is required for sneak attack. You are going to get some bonus skill increases for either acrobatics or your style skill, whereas the Rogue is just picking up skill increases and skill trainings left and right. A Swashbuckler is going to get this really nice circumstance bonus to their bravado skills, making them incredibly good at skill actions. Whereas the Rogue will often lean into things like more sources of off guard or making off guard last longer. The Swashbuckler is a bit tankier. It's going to have better mobility. It has some really good things associated with bucklers that we'll talk about later in this video. It has higher base HP. Whereas I think the Rogue is slightly more offensive nature with the ability to sneak attack multiple times in a turn, which you really don't get to do with your whole panache and finisher situation. So if you are looking at both of these classes and you go, I would like to attack more, Rogue might be for you. And if you look at Swashbuckler and you're like, I would like to be the fancy lad, I would like to dance around in combat, and I'll be so good at dancing, the Swashbuckler offers a lot and will be very good at their specific skills, whereas the Rogue might be generically more useful. Sometimes the Rogues are referred to as skill monkeys. That is, they have a ton of skill trainings. The Swashbuckler is more of a specialist. You're going to be really, really good at the things that you're good at. And as we are looking ahead to very high levels, the Swashbuckler has some really cool things going for them if you reach, the end of a campaign with a Swashbuckler. Legendary proficiency rank in reflex saves means that you are going to dodge a lot of very, very common sources of damage. And even when you fail or critically fail, you can hedge against those things. For those of you coming from D&D specifically, the champion fighter is so cool because you crit on 19s and 20s. Well, you can do that as a Swashbuckler as well. And a quick note on the math here, you are not always going to crit on a 19 in this system. So this is actually adding a bonus. This isn't a pretend bonus, especially when you are working against things with, say, a very, very high C because you're fighting like a level +3 solo enemy or something like that. And when you start getting to the 20th level capstone feats, there are some pretty ridiculous ones. You want to do more than one finisher in a turn? Well, as it turns out, there is actually a way to do that for one action. It's scary. So with that being said, let's start talking about these individual styles. Okay, let's talk styles here. When you choose your style, you are going to become trained in a specific skill. And some of the actions associated with that skill are going to gain the bravado trait, meaning that you can use them to get panache. So for example, if you choose to be a battle dancer, you're going to become trained in performance, and your performance action is now going to have the bravado trait, meaning that when you perform, you get panache, meaning that you can then do a finisher after you already have panache. But in kind of understanding this chart, there's something very, very important to realize that might not immediately be obvious. Selecting your style does not prevent you from taking the other actions of the other styles. And while many subclasses in PF2E have feats that only they can specifically take, that is not true here. I skimmed all the Swashbuckler feats, and I don't believe that any of them require you to be a specific style. Now, are some of those feats very, very obviously going to be better for certain styles? Yes, absolutely. And something to think about when you are looking at your various swashbuckler feats is which of them innately have the bravado trait versus which ones of them are relying on you getting that bravado trait from your style. And some of the really good feats actually have the bravado trait built in. So you could take them even if that wasn't your primary focus of your build. In thinking about your builds, the style that you choose is going to really impact what your stats look like at level 1. Many of these styles sort of have you going down the path of charisma, but some of them are dexterity based, and one of them is strength based. So keep in mind that your style is going to impact your stat spread, especially early on. And remember, the style that you take, those actions are going to get the bravado trait, right? Meaning that you get to add your stylish combatant bonus to them. So you will innately be better at the actions that have the bravado trait on this right-hand column here if you are in that specific style. You can still take those other actions. You can still demoralize if you are a battle dancer, and you frequently might, but you're not getting that nice, juicy bravado trait from stylish combatant. I'm now going to try to go through each one of the schools and give you some idea about what that school offers and some of the good things to do if you are within that style. The first is the Battle Dancer, which is our performance-based one. And in terms of raw power level, like white room math sorts of scenarios, the Battle Dancer is probably the weakest. However, if you are in a roleplay heavy campaign, the perform action is incredibly strong. I recently got done playing a bard, and it was just so cool to be able to walk into a new town, spend a night in a tavern, perform for the people there, and like spread rumors about the things that our party has done and use that as a way to sort of upgrade our reputation with the townsfolk. And I had a lot of fun using the perform action. In terms of in-battle utility, the two things on the screen here are some of my favorites with the Battle Dancer. Distracting performance is a way to make an ally temporarily disappear. So you can do the create a diversion action, except you're rolling performance instead of deception, and the benefits of it end up going to an ally rather than yourself. So if an enemy is closing in on your ally, you will do a distracting performance, draw their attention, and then your ally can, just kind of chill out for a minute, maybe drink a health potion or something. Maybe the enemy uses some move actions moving towards you or someone else instead, and you buy them that little bit of time they need. Leading Dance is probably the most interesting one for a battle dancer, though. So this can allow you to move an enemy exactly where you want them to be. On a critical success, you both move, that is, you and your enemy, move up to 10 feet in the same direction. You still have to remain next to each other. You're dancing, after all. This doesn't trigger reactions from the target, which is cool. Reactive strikes are very real. So if you need to get an enemy into exactly the right square so that you can do some really cool, I think it's follow-through finisher to impale two enemies at the same time, or you need to move an enemy so that they are exactly in the area of effect of your opponent's fireball or whatever they're looking to do, this can be a really cool and rather unique action. And moving 10 feet is like a really big deal. Oh, somebody is blocking the doorway. Not anymore, they're not. We're dancing. And the Braggart is up next, which is probably the best generic choice. The Demoralize action is very strong in Pathfinder 2E because it is a way to support the entire party at once. When you are frightened, your AC lowers, your various skill checks are going to lower. It's kind of like temporarily de-leveling an enemy in some ways. And if their spell saves, if their like reflex and fortitude and will DCs are going to go down, that means it is easier for your spellcasters to succeed. If their AC is going down, it's easier for your fighters to hit them afterwards. And you can pick up things like Intimidating Glare, so that your Demoralize loses the auditory trait, gains the visual trait. Big plus there. And a little bit later on, around level 7, you could pick up Battle Cry, allowing you to demoralize an observed foe as a free action. Massive thumbs up for the Braggart, who will get Panache after demoralizing an enemy. And presuming you end up going to Legendary in Intimidation, there's other benefits as well. Now, a quick note here. Buried in the Bravado text, there is this line that I have in quotes here. These effects can be applied even if the action had no other effect due to a failure or a creature's immunity. One of the obvious downsides of being a braggart is that after you demoralize an enemy, they are immune to your demoralize. You can technically demoralize them again if all that you specifically want is to gain panache, but you are not going to give that enemy the frightened condition again. So you can keep spamming demoralize in a single enemy fight if you just need to do it to get panache, but you are not getting very much of a benefit for doing so. So just be aware. If you are not sure what Swashbuckler to play, this one is going to provide excellent ally support to just literally any party. Next up is the Fencer. This is your deception-based one that is great at feinting and creating diversions. This is a Swashbuckler that is fine and a bit selfish. Let me explain what I mean. When we think about the braggart, the frightened condition that you are giving enemies benefits every single one of your party members. When you feint, on the other hand, what happens? Critical success. Target is off guard against melee attacks that you attempt against it until the end of your next turn. So your braggart will often demoralize someone, succeed, and they are frightened 1. So the AC of that enemy is going down by 1. When you make someone off guard against you, their AC is going down by 2. So if your sole goal is, I want to hit this enemy very consistently, the Fencer is very, very good at that. If you're not good at providing off guard by doing something like flanking with someone else, this is very, very valuable. If, however, you've got a couple of martial characters in your party and you can regularly achieve flanking, you probably get more mileage out of the braggart, which is better overall for the entire party. This is one of those times where you might want to think about the whole party before you decide to make a Fencer. And sometimes it will objectively be a good call because you don't expect to have a flanking buddy. Next up is the Gymnast, which is awkward because it is what we call a mad choice. That is multiple attribute dependent, multiple ability score dependent, however you want to think of it. You as a class probably want dexterity. You are a light armor class. You are probably using an agile or finesse weapon. You probably want to increase your dexterity, and because like acrobatics for tumble through is going to give you panache. But this is gearing you towards athletics and strength. And we know that after we do a finisher, we can't do something with the attack action, which the things the Gymnast wants to be doing has. And you don't want to maybe trip someone and then immediately follow up with your finisher because your finisher is going to have map. So the Gymnast is a very, very awkward choice, and you should know what you're doing if you are choosing Gymnast. That is not to say that the Gymnast is not powerful, because I believe at level 10, it becomes the best in the entire game at what it does. The Daring Do, feat is pretty insane. When you already have panache, you can roll twice and use the higher result on checks to which the circumstance bonus from Stylish Combatant applies. So, you want to be so good at tripping. Well, Swashbuckler is your class. So not only do you get that nice +1 circumstance bonus to your trip from Stylish Combatant, but you also get to roll with advantage and take the higher roll. This is kind of disgusting. And we're going to go more into this feat a little bit later on in the video. But if you are building a Gymnast, this level 10 feat is probably the payoff for doing so. Obligatory wrestler dedication is something you should be thinking about. Comment as well. Next up is the Wrestler. If the Gymnast was mad and required multiple different stats to be high, the Rascal is sad. And dexterity is the only thing you need for this. You're using your dexterity to hit. You are using your dexterity for your thievery, for dirty trick. You can have much more flexibility with a Rascal than with other Swashbucklers, because all the other Swashbucklers are forcing you into like charisma and dexterity or strength and dexterity. If you have some weird free archetype thing that you want to make happen and you need a bunch of intelligence, the Rascal might be the way that you actually build this. The clumsy that you can get from Dirty Trick is going to stack with Off Guard, meaning that you can effectively flank with someone and then make them clumsy to make it so that they have an effective -3 to AC. Huge thumbs up, that makes it easy to do big damage with a finisher. This is one of the styles that requires you to have a free hand to do the things that you want to be doing. That will be true with a couple of them. It depends a little bit on whether or not you're going down a one-handed or two-handed weapon route with some of the other Swashbuckler styles. More on that later. Note here that the Dirty Trick feat does have the attack trait, so keep in mind that you can't use this in the same turn that you are doing one of your finishers. And finally, we have the Wit style, which is trained in diplomacy and gives the bravado trait to the Bone Mow skill feat. Bone Mow is one of the best ways that you can support casters, but specifically, it is supporting casters who can target will saves. So if you have a nice occult caster in your party, you are going to be their best friend. And you even have some small combos within your own class. You can use Bone Mow to lower their will DC and then demoralize them so that it is more likely to succeed. And this is excellent support, not just for your spellcaster friends, but also for yourself. Note that Bone Mow does have the linguistic trait, meaning that if the enemy does not understand you, it's going to take a penalty. And by it, I mean your check. So, if you are a wit-style swashbuckler, consider the multilingual skill feat, or maybe be a gnome and pick up the gnome polyglot feat at level 1, which makes you better at multilingual feat and also gives you some bonus languages. 3 bonus languages is nothing to sneeze at here. Now, while your style does not lock you in or out of swashbuckler-specific feats, you do want to think ahead to level 9, where you pick up the exemplary finisher feat. So if your strike as a part of your finisher hits your foe, you get to do something else. Battle Dancer's Step, Braggart's End the immunity to demoralize that things normally get after you demoralize them. A really, really big deal for them. That's a major power-up. Fencers can make people off guard. Gymnasts can get a little bit of circumstance bonus to their damage. Rascals can slow enemies down. And Wit takes a -2 circumstance penalty to your attack rolls until the start of your next turn. So all of these are pretty good, with perhaps the Rascals being the weakest here. So there's our styles. Let's start thinking about actual gameplay. And I actually want to start by not getting into combat, but thinking about the thing that happens when you start combat, the initiative roll. Swashbucklers are unique in that they have 2 different feats that go in very different directions that alter how they roll initiative. The After You feat allows you to voluntarily go last to gain panache, and the Swaggering Initiative feat gives you a +2 circumstance bonus to your initiative roll, and you can interact to draw a weapon if you don't already have it out for some reason, and if you're the first to act in combat, you gain panache. And these are sort of strange feats, and I want to talk about them a little bit. The first is After You. So, you want to go last, you gain panache. Generally speaking, I would like to go as early in the initiative count as is possible. I think it is often very, very important for you to go before the enemy to set yourself up for success for a fight. This is especially true for spellcasters who maybe can lay down an area of effect spell before all of the enemies move and get too close to you, and then they can't use their fireball or other really cool AoE spell. But this is different for a martial character. And in evaluating this skill feat for your table, you need to think about how big your battle maps are. I want you to think about the difference between you starting 10 to 15 feet away from your enemy and you starting 100 feet away from your enemy. If you are starting in a situation where it might take 2 or 3 or maybe even more stride actions to make it to an enemy, then going last in initiative, might actually be good. Because your enemy spends a bunch of actions moving towards you, and then maybe you use one action to move towards them, rather than wasting 3 actions having to do the movement yourself. The next thing to ask is, how badly do you actually need panache on turn 1? Swashbucklers aren't necessarily going to use a finisher every single turn of every combat. And since they are so good at getting panache now, and since there are so many feats that give you new ways to get panache, the Swashbuckler is not starved to get panache anymore like it was in the pre-remaster world. And a major change in the evaluation of panache is now that things that have the bravado trait, even if you fail that action, you still get panache until the end of your turn. So gaining panache is no longer this like, gaining panache is so tough, I need to take anything that can give me panache, even if it's a little bit awkward, sort of situation. So I would, generally speaking, say that After You is not a feat that you should be considering unless you're very much playing at this table where there are going to be these big battle maps and there is just not going to be a real benefit to you going first. If you win the initiative roll at your table and the first thing you think is, I'm going to delay, okay, maybe After You is good for your table. But generally speaking, I would be very cautious about taking this feat. On the other hand, we have Swaggering Initiative, which is going to give you a circumstance bonus to your initiative roll and potentially give you panache. And what I want you to think about now is the math. What are the chances that you actually are going to win the initiative roll? Is Wisdom one of the stats that you are buffing on this character to increase your perception stat? Maybe not. How many of your fellow PCs have Incredible Initiative or some other similar effect? Elves have another thing that also gives them a circumstance bonus to initiative rolls. And also, were you just going to use one of your general feat slots to take Incredible Initiative? Then why use a class feat slot to do the same thing? And this is a time where I actually encourage you, ask your fellow PCs, hey, what is your bonus to initiative? And think, what is the chance that I roll higher than every one of them? And then, on top of that, also think, what is the chance that I beat every single enemy as well in initiative? So mathematically, I don't think you are going to end up with panache very much of the time, even if you do have that +2 circumstance bonus to your initiative roll. And there are some classes where if you have them in the party, like, good luck winning initiative. So for example, the Animist has I think level 6 class feat that gives them an absurd bonus to their initiative rolls. Yeah, Medium's Awareness gives them at first a +2 status bonus to perception checks made for initiative rolls and to seek, which means that they can stack that with Incredible Initiative, and they're also a wisdom-based class. So yeah. If you are at a table where you are often surprised, though, and your GM is like, okay, these negotiations went south, roll initiative, they're going to fight you, and nobody has their weapons out, and your GM makes you draw weapons, okay, getting that circumstance bonus to your initiative roll and getting the bonus of drawing your weapon, that is actually real. So even though the Swashbuckler offers these things that manipulate your initiative, you probably shouldn't be taking them, unless the circumstances are just right. All right, so now how about we talk about some of the best Swashbuckler feats, some of the things that you should be thinking about, maybe building your entire character around. The first is One for All. This is, in my mind, one of the best generic Swashbuckler feats, and when you see classes archetype into the Swashbuckler, it is very frequently for this specific feat. It lets you use diplomacy for absolutely every single aid action. You're going to lift that rock, bud. I'm going to give you a pep talk. You're going to shoot a spell at that creature. I'm going to tell you exactly how you should do it. And more importantly for you, that action is going to get the bravado trait, meaning that you are not only going to give your ally a big boost to the thing you are going to do, you are also going to gain panache, so this can set you up for your finishers and your other cool things that are going to be using panache. This is an ability that is going to get stronger over time, and it's actually hardest to use at level 1 because the aid action has a typical flat DC of 15, meaning that as you level up, it becomes trivial to just crit on this. And you can basically eventually be giving a +4 circumstance bonus to, say, your ally's attack roll or an important skill check every single turn. That's incredibly powerful. And One for All might become a critical part of your typical turn cycle. More on that in a little bit. For those styles that are accruing map, say you want to trip someone and then use a finisher afterwards, combination finisher is something that you should be looking at. It makes your finisher's strikes have a lower multiple attack penalty, and you're likely using an agile weapon if you're taking this, meaning that your map for that is -3. That's pretty reasonable, especially if you are doing something like trip that is forcing an enemy to become prone, meaning that they are off guard, so they have 2 less AC. So that means effectively your finisher could be just 1 less accurate than normal. That's a really big deal for this class. Notably here, this does occur at level 6. This feat is going to compete with reactive strike. So on some builds, you may end up taking this or reactive strike at 8th level instead of 6th because you're taking the other one. Hey, let's talk about reactive strike. So the Swashbuckler is perhaps not the best reactive strike character. The Swashbuckler has some other powerful reaction options, very notably the aid action with One for All. Your weapon may or may not have reach, and reactive strike is leagues better when you do have reach. As a Swashbuckler, a lot of your burst damage, a lot of your hard hits end up coming from the bonus precision damage that you are getting when you do a finisher. Well, your reactive strike isn't a finisher, it is just a regular strike. If a bunch of your damage is coming from that panache-based finisher, your reactive strike isn't hitting as hard as that barbarian or that exemplar who is always adding a bunch of flat damage to their hits. So reactive strike is still reactive strike. It is still a good feat, but I encourage you to think, am I building this character in a way that uses reactive strike well, or am I better off building this character in a way that doesn't take reactive strike and instead focuses on some of the other reactions this class has to offer? And there are a few. Dazzling Display is very, very powerful. Level 10, really big level for Swashbucklers. So, for a single action, you can attempt intimidation checks to demoralize each enemy within 30 feet. And Dazzling Display has its own cooldown that is separate from your cooldown for Demoralize. So you could, on the first turn, say Dazzling Display, temporarily demoralize everybody, and then regular demoralize something else the following turn after, its frightened condition has already ticked back down to 0. Buckler Dance is a really neat one. Bucklers are something that most classes are probably not going to consider, but the Swashbucklers are great at using them. They have a level 1 feat that when you raise a shield, you get a +2 to AC from raising your buckler, whereas it's normally +1. And if you're a little bit lucky, say your GM is making a bunch of third action mapped attacks on you, an enemy might critically miss you, and you could pick up panache as well. But the Buckler Dance stance that you can pick up at level 10 is a really, really big upgrade for shield users here. So for one action, you constantly have your buckler raised as if you'd used raise shield, as long as you meet that action's requirements. So one action, raise shield for the rest of the encounter. One action, permanent +2 AC. That's hot. That's really, really big payoff for a build. And now I want to loop back to one of our feats from earlier, everyone's favorite fortune effect, at least if you're a swashbuckler. So, Daring Do, question mark, is reusable. Many times when you have fortune effects, they are coming from a spell slot, they are coming from a once a day ability or something like that. This is just something that you can keep doing every single turn. And this is so powerful that it might change the way that you play your character. So when you finally level up to 10, you might have spent levels 1 through 9 going through a pattern of getting panache, spending panache just as quickly as possible. And now you might be incentivized to get panache and not spend it anymore because you just want to always have panache so that you can just keep rolling twice on these very important skill actions that you are going to do. This is build changing levels of powerful and is going to lead into one of my next points, which is sort of your turn cycles and how you are going to spend and use panache. So let's get into that. In thinking about panache, at its simplest level, panache exists so you can do finishers. You get panache so you can have your big dammies. That's what that thing exists for. But while you have panache, you have a speed increase, and you do get some regular flat damage on strikes. You don't have to spend it, and indeed, there might be situations where you don't want to spend it intentionally. Let's kind of think about some different turns that swashbucklers might have. I think, especially at early levels, the simple turn cycle looks like stride up to an enemy, do something that gives you panache, and use a finisher. And that pattern is going to repeat a lot. But what if the enemies are really far away? I'm going to use some action that gives me panache, and now I'm going to stride twice while having a massive speed bonus. And if you have something that will give you panache, but not immediately, a lot of times you're going to be cycling on more than one turn worth of actions. And this is most commonly going to happen if you are using All for One, that thing that lets you aid anybody with diplomacy. Your turns might look like stride, strike an enemy, and then use All for One. You don't have panache yet. Use your reaction, you gain panache. Well, then maybe on your next turn, you'll spend that panache on a finisher, and then you will use All for One again to prepare to repeat the cycle, filling your turn with some other skill action from there. And your turn cycles are going to vary a little bit depending on what style you have chosen. For example, if your Bone Mow has the Bravado trait, you might be really incentivized to Bone Mow someone, get panache, demoralize them after they are Bone Mowed, and now that their stats are lowered, use your finisher. And if you are doing the whole Daring Do, I'm going to trip you thing, your turns might look different. You might start by, say, tumbling through an enemy or doing something that does not have the attack trait to gain panache before doing a trip with your fortune effect, so you roll with advantage, and then maybe you just close your turn by making a mapped strike on the enemy who is hopefully now on the ground and has lower AC. What I'm getting at with this slide is that you don't always have to be planning to use a finisher every single turn with your character. You can just build your swashbuckler to optimize for damage, but there are other ways to build your swashbuckler where you are instead optimizing for support. So let's look at how these two types of swashbucklers might be different. If you are building your swashbuckler to optimize for damage, the first thing that you are probably doing is figuring out, how do I get the big weapon die? How do I roll the D8 when I attack? And I want you to, even if you're trying to optimize for damage, I want you to understand that you might not do the most damage and be the most effective in combat by just taking something like the Elven Curve Blade that is a D8 weapon. Traits matter a lot on the swashbuckler. And for those of you that are going to be building around reactive strike at level 6, reach matters a lot for you. So, are you over the course of an entire fight, going to do more damage with your Elven Curve Blade that is rolling a d8? Or are you going to do more damage with the Bladed Scarf that has reach and therefore has more opportunities to do things with reactive strike? So, in thinking about your build and optimizing for damage, don't get distracted by thinking that the damage die is the be all end all. Even on one handed weapons, a d4 weapon with reach might sometimes be better than a d6 weapon. And you're going to have to think, what traits do I want? How much do I care about versatile weapons that can do two different damage types? How much do I think I am going to crit? How much do I care about those deadly d8s? So a lot of times on a one-handed build, you are going to be rocking a d6 weapon. A lot of times on a two-handed build, you're also rocking a d6 weapon, but you are going to have a little more versatility there in your damage types, picking up reach, that sort of stuff. If you are looking to just kind of pore over all of the traits, Augustus Aurora has a written Swashbuckler guide that has a pretty good chart of one-handed and two-handed weapons and some of the things that you might be looking at in terms of picking weapons. I had already made my show notes, video notes. It's in the podcast exactly, it kind of is, before this had released, but I figured it was worth mentioning here. Now, if you are optimizing for damage, you are probably trying to do a finisher in most of your turns, and you are probably trying to avoid map on your actions. You want your finishers to hit. You probably care quite a bit about gaining bonus damage from the reactive strike feat, and you have probably funneled a little bit of your resources into strength to just get the damage that you want out of your hits. If you are specifically trying to do a finisher every single turn, consider finishing follow through. Whenever your finisher brings a target to 0 HP, you gain panache. So if you are worried about your action economy, and you are worried like, oh, I might need to stride twice to get to that enemy, finishing follow through helps a lot with that sort of stuff. So if you are worried about physically having enough actions to always have panache and finisher every turn, this is good for you. Another strong level 6 feat here is the precise finisher. So on a failure with your finisher, you can still apply your full precise strike damage instead of the half damage that you normally get. That can mean that your average damage ends up being very, very good even against high AC enemies. Note here that this is, again, competing with reactive strike at level 6. Level 6. Big swashbuckler level. But if you are instead trying to optimize your character for supporting the entire party, instead of making sure that you have a high damage output, you're trying to make sure that the party has a high damage output. And you might be much more concerned with denying enemy actions or setting up your allies than you are about making your own finishers. And you might be more flexible with panache. Whereas the person who is trying to optimize for their damage is saying, I want to finisher every turn. I'm going to spend that money as soon as it hits my wallet. I don't need to keep this panache around. You might keep your panache around for a turn, maybe even for 2 turns in some scenarios before you spend it. And the people who are optimizing for support are probably going to use more of their class feats to do follow-up feats for skill actions. The various styles have follow-up feats that make some of the actions even better than they normally are. I've used antagonize as an example here. So when you demoralize a creature, its frightened condition can't decrease to less than 1 at the end of its turn until it uses a hostile action against you or can no longer observe you or sense you. Or instead of using your reaction to reactive strike, you might use your Guardian's deflection to keep enemies from hitting your allies. And these are 2 very, very different ways to play the same class. So this person who is optimizing for support is probably inflicting status conditions on people, whether that's fascinated, frightened, prone, whatever. And they are going to be much more concerned with using their skill actions or using one for all to set up other people to be very, very successful. And aiding your spellcaster's big spell attack rolls is a really fantastic way to drastically increase the damage output of your party. A final note in terms of optimization here. As you are building your character, whether you are thinking about optimizing for damage or optimizing for support, I really encourage you to think about your action economy. All these things that I've been talking about today are things that the Swashbuckler is capable of doing in combat. The Swashbuckler is so incredibly good at finding 3 things to do in any given turn. You are not hurting for things to do with your 3rd action. So as you are thinking about your archetype, be thinking, what do I actually need? And it is perhaps not casting a 2-action spell. So from your free archetype, be thinking about, how am I going to get some bonus skill trainings on this character? Do I need armor proficiency on this character for some reason? Do I want to go up to heavy armor instead of the light armor that I'm normally in? Do I not have a reaction on my character and I need my archetype to give me a reaction? Is there some out of combat thing that I would like to be better at? So just be careful, sort of like a thaumaturge here. You have too many things to do with your actions already. You don't need more actions on top of that in terms of optimizing your character. All right, let's go ahead and bring this video to a close here. Let's talk about some conclusions on the class. When I thought of the Swashbuckler a couple of weeks ago, before I started doing the research and playtesting for this video, I thought that the class was pretty mid. And now, having done a ton of research and testing, I've decided that I think the class is very, very good at supporting other characters while still having burst damage. If you do one-to-one comparisons with other classes, the Swashbuckler is going to come up short. But it occupies a very neat niche where it is simultaneously capable of the burst damage that can just absolutely delete enemies, while still being able to go like, "Don't worry, bud, I've got you. Use your ultimate attack now, I'll aid you." And that is a cool niche to occupy. My biggest complaint about the Swashbuckler, though, is that I think the class is very slow to get fully online. Level 10 is something that came up a lot in this video, as did level 6. There are some very clear breakpoints where the Swashbuckler gets a bunch of really cool toys, but you maybe can't take all of the toys on the same character. You can only take so many 6th level feats, right? You can only take so many 10th level feats, and you're going to keep getting offered other things. So I think many Swashbuckler players might be frustrated with their characters before they reach some of these level breakpoints where their builds really come together. I find a lot of times when I am building characters, by the time I hit level 4, I'm just like, okay, this character is good to go. I can do all of the primary things that I want to do. And with the Swashbuckler, I feel that that progression is slower. So overall, I like this class. I think it has some good things going for it, but I do think the class has some real sort of startup time before it does its thing really well. All right, folks, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day, and if you've made it this far in the video, leave me a comment with some of your thoughts, throw me a like or a subscription. Those sorts of things are going to help out the channel a lot and make it so that I can make more content that looks like this. See ya!